Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye is set for talks with US President Barack Obama on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit in Laos. North Korea is likely to dominate the discussions. The UN Security Council convenes an emergency meeting on North Korea after the regime launched 3 ballistic missiles into the East Sea on Monday. Plus, South Korea's ruling party and the government agreed to provide ailing Hanjin shipping with a low-interest government loan of $90 million. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 6th of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, President Park Geun-hye is due to depart for Laos for the ASEAN Summit following her stays in Russia and China for different multilateral summits. The South Korean leader has been winning international support to rein in North Korea's nuclear development while highlighting Seoul's ideas to foster economic growth. She'll sit down with US President Barack Obama soon after she lands in Laos. Our Song Ji-son, who's travelling with the president, looks back on her last 2 stops and has a preview of the trip to Southeast Asia.
After agreeing to reinforce strategic communication with Russia and China on the North Korean issue, President Park will sit down with U.S. President Barack Obama soon after she lands in Laos on Tuesday, and with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe the next day, sending a united message to Pyongyang from all the members of the 6-party denuclearization talks.
북한이 핵을 포기할 수밖에 없도록 만들려면 북한에 단호하고 일치된 메시지를 보내는 것이 무엇보다 중요합니다. 우리 정부는 북한이 핵을 포기하고 개방과 협력의 길로 나온다면 국제사회와 함께 적극 지원할 것입니다.
Following the multilateral summit, President Park will seek support through bilateral talks with Laos, a socialist state close to North Korea, and the chair for this year's ASEAN Summit.
At events like the East Asian Summit, the best strategic forum in the region that's attended by the leaders of ASEAN, the US, China, Japan, and Russia, President Park will call on the world to send a strong message that North Korea's nuclear program cannot be tolerated. We must continue to cooperate to help Pyongyang make the right choice.
At her last stop of Vientiane, Laos for the ASEAN Summit, President Park will continue her call to implement the UN sanctions to pressure North Korea and to boost job creation and growth through open trade. Song Ji-son, Arirang News, Hangzhou.
It's becoming all too common these days, but the UN Security Council will gather for yet another hastily arranged meeting on North Korea's provocations. Pyongyang launched 3 powerful missiles into waters off its east coast on Monday, drawing sharp criticism from around the world. Kwon Soo-ah reports.
The UN Security Council is convening yet another emergency meeting on North Korea's threats. It comes just 10 days after the Security Council adopted a press statement condemning Pyongyang for its test firing of a submarine-launched ballistic missile late last month. The Council's 15 member nations are expected to discuss how to put more pressure on the regime after it fired 3 Nodong medium-range missiles off its east coast on Monday, less than 2 weeks after its SLBM test. Following the strong denouncements out of Seoul and Tokyo on Monday, the U.S. echoed the criticism. According to State Department spokesman John Kirby, the U.S. strongly condemns the 3 ballistic missile launches, saying they have become far too common in recent months. While the regime's nuclear and missile programs are a threat to the U.S. and its allies, South Korea and Japan, Kirby said the, quote, reckless launches by North Korea threaten civil aviation and maritime commerce in the region. He added the U.S. will raise its concerns at the UN as well as at the East Asia Summit in Laos Tuesday. The European Union also urged Pyongyang to completely abandon its ballistic missile development. It said North Korea should restart dialogue with the international community especially within the framework of the long-stalled six-party denuclearization talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Seoul's foreign ministry announced Tuesday that South Korea's representative to the six-party talks, Kim Hong-gyun, and his U.S. counterpart Sung Kim are expected to discuss ways to counter North Korea's threats next week during talks in Seoul. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The U.S. military believes 2 of the 3 missiles launched by North Korea on Monday were intermediate-range ballistic missiles. The range of the 3rd missile is still being assessed. The U.S. Strategic Command did not elaborate on whether the intermediate-range missiles were Nodong or the longer-range Musudan missile, which is believed to be capable of reaching the U.S. territory of Guam. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said shortly after the launches Monday that they were all Nodong missiles. The missiles flew around 1,000 kilometers before coming down in the East Sea. North Korea appears unfazed by the worldwide condemnation of its latest missile launches. In fact, it's giving itself a pat on the back, calling the launches a success and vowing to strengthen its nuclear forces. Connie Kim with the details.
A day after North Korea fired 3 ballistic missiles into the East Sea, Pyongyang's leader Kim Jong-un vowed that the regime will continue to develop its nuclear capabilities. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said Tuesday Kim Jong-un was present for the launches, which it said were part of an exercise, and was satisfied that they went according to plan. The news agency also said North Korean artillery units took part in the exercise and are ready to target U.S. military bases in the Pacific region in case of an emergency. The report, however, did not specify when the drills were held. North Korea's official state newspaper Rodong Sinmun ran color photos of Kim Jong-un supervising the missile launch on its front page. Wearing a white top and thick-rimmed glasses, Kim was shown using binoculars to watch the launch. On top of a table in the photo was a map with lines drawn around Japan, hinting that the North's target was waters within Japan's air defense identification zone, where the missiles ended up landing. Pyongyang's submarine-launched ballistic missile last month also flew about 80 kilometers into Japanese airspace. The launches have many North Korea watchers in Seoul concerned by the regime's advancing nuclear capabilities, as its missile range becomes longer and its aim more precise. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, over half of Hanjin Shipping's fleet has stopped operating following the company's slide into a court-led restructuring scheme last week. In the latest support measure, the government and the ruling party have decided to provide a low-interest fund for Hanjin Group. Kim Minjoo has the details.
The government and the ruling party have agreed to extend low-rate loans worth roughly $90 million to Hanjin Group. The latest measure comes amid a global logistics crisis caused by Korea's largest shipper, Hanjin Shipping, going into court receivership. They will also help Hanjin obtain stay orders in over 40 countries to keep creditors from seizing its vessels and to secure entry rights at ports. More than 60 Hanjin vessels have been in irregular operations in 24 countries, including China and Japan, since the company filed for court receivership. This as port workers refuse to load or unload cargo in fear the company can't pay the fees. The government has been pressuring Hanjin Group to raise capital to ensure the delivery of its cargo, saying the conglomerate needs to do more. But the group's latest rescue plan is more or less similar to the one submitted before Hanjin Shipping filed for receivership, which creditors rejected. Under the plan, Hanjin's biggest shareholder, Korean Air, would inject over $360 million by issuing new stock. And if that's not enough, it would raise an extra $90 million through other affiliates. In return, Hanjin Group has asked creditors to also pump in about $450 million. Korea's finance minister stressed that Hanjin's first and foremost priority should be to ensure that cargoes carried by its vessels arrive safely at their destinations. Speaking to reporters on the sidelines of the G20 summit, Minister Yoo Il-ho said the company and its creditors can discuss with the court about ways to raise money under the condition that Hanjin takes full responsibility for the unpaid port fees. Yoo said the Korean government has vowed to pull out all the stops to minimize the fallout from the Hanjin crisis and has formed a response team to keep close tabs on the situation. Kim Minjoo, Arirang News.
At the National Assembly this morning, it was the main opposition Minjoo Party of Korea's turn to lay out its policies for Parliament's new regular session. Tuesday's address by the Minjoo Party's new chief, Chu Mi-ae, emphasised the importance of revitalising the economy, taking issue with President Park Geun-hye's current economic policies. Calling for change, Chu proposed an emergency economic meeting of the major parties and the president, saying they need to come together to remedy the current economic situation. She added that the government hasn't done enough to improve the livelihoods of the people and called for a change in the current economic paradigm focused on conglomerates. Policy, she said, needs to help ordinary people instead. The opposition party leader also promised that she'll work to get rid of political divisions within and amongst parties, starting with her own Minjoo Party. The Korean government has confirmed the price caps on gifts and meals that will be imposed when the nation's new anti-graft law takes effect in less than 3 weeks from now. Under the caps confirmed at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, civil servants, journalists, teachers and other employees within the public sector will not be allowed to accept meals exceeding 30,000 Korean won or some $27 US. The limit for gifts has been set at $45. And for cash gifts at occasions like weddings or funerals, the cap has been set at $90. The anti-corruption law will affect almost 41,000 institutions, over 95% of which are schools and media corporations. The anti-graft law, first proposed 4 years ago, has now completed all the necessary legal procedures and will take effect on September 28th. Officials hope the new law will cut down on corruption and bribery in society. The Chief Justice of Korea's Supreme Court has issued a public apology for a recent corruption scandal involving a senior judge. At a meeting on Tuesday morning, a conference of senior judges, Yang Sung-tae made a statement of apology regarding the case of incumbent senior judge Kim Soo-chan, who was arrested last Friday for allegedly taking bribes from the former president of a Korean cosmetics company. Kim served on the District Court of Incheon, the port city just west of Seoul. Chief Justice Yang added that in view of the seriousness of the charges, the judiciary will take meaningful action as more details come to light. US President Barack Obama has cancelled a planned meeting with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte after the Philippine leader described his US counterpart in rather vulgar terms. A White House spokesman announced the decision on Tuesday and said Obama will meet, as we heard, with Korean President Park Geun-hye instead. Hours earlier, Duterte had railed against Obama, saying he would not be lectured by the US leader on human rights. The meeting would have been the first between the two, the Philippine leader having taken office in June. Since then, police and vigilantes have killed more than 2,400 people in the Philippines in a war against drugs. Obama said the US recognizes the challenges posed by drug trafficking, but it needs to be handled in a way that is consistent with international norms. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe have agreed to accelerate talks on their territorial dispute in the East China Sea. During their first one-on-one talks since April of last year, Abe said any dispute has to be solved peacefully under international law, not through power or intimidation. In response, President Xi urged Japan to exercise caution in its words and deeds. He added that both countries should try to bring their relations back on track of normal development as soon as possible. The two sides later agreed to speed up talks on implementing an air and sea hotline between their defense ministries to prevent further accidental clashes in the East China Sea. China and Japan have faced off numerous times over the ownership of a group of uninhabited islands called the Senkakus in Japan and Diaoyu in China. At least 40 people have been killed in a series of bombings in Syria that struck in and around the strongholds of the Bashar al-Assad regime. The blasts hit the government-held areas of Tartus and Homs, as well as Hasaka, which is mostly controlled by Kurdish forces. The so-called Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attacks through its Amaq news agency, saying the attacks were suicide operations targeting the Syrian government and the Kurds. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights has put the death toll at 47. Now back here in Korea, and subway and bus operations in Seoul will be extended to 2 a.m. on September 16th and 17th to accommodate those returning to the capital after Chuseok. The Seoul Metropolitan Government said Tuesday that subway trains will run for an extra hour past their usual time of 1 a.m. Buses passing through major train stations and bus terminals will also be extended to 2 a.m. Late-night buses and taxis, well, they're going to be operating as normal. There will also be increased bus services to municipal cemeteries from the 15th to the 16th, as Koreans traditionally pay respect to their ancestors over the holiday. More intercity buses travelling to and from Seoul will also be laid on for the public. Traffic authorities are expecting the worst congestion on expressways, with some 5.3 million cars expected to hit the road on September 15th alone. Well, those are the stories we're following on this Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website, arirang.com/news. We also have a smartphone application. You can find it by searching for Arirang TV in your app store. Have a great rest of the day or night, wherever you're watching us. Goodbye.